No parent can look after their child 24/7, and while it's perfectly natural to worry, leaving them in the care of someone else is inevitable. But the unfortunate reality is that you never really know whom you can trust. From sisters to family friends, every single one of these people definitely cannot be trusted to care for any children. Losing a child is pretty much the worst experience any parent can go through, but the pain isn't limited to mourning. Years after the death, many parents are haunted by the question of why and what if. Usually, these questions are rhetorical and will fade over time as the parents come to terms with their loss, but not for one Iowa couple. After the death of their 5-month-old son Ryan in 1992, Michael and Lisa Barley kept a secret, not because they were afraid of being found guilty, but because they were afraid they'd blow their chance. Though their son's cause of death was officially ruled as sudden infant death syndrome, the Barleys believed that he had been murdered. So for 19 long years, they sealed their lips and bode their time until in 2011 they got the evidence they had been waiting for. Melissa Haskell was babysitting Ryan on the night that he died. She claimed that she had found Ryan unresponsive in his crib. Despite bruising on his body, the cause of death was ruled as SIDS, and the case was closed until Michael Loeffler appeared in 2011. The estranged husband of Melissa Haskell, Loeffler claimed that she had confessed the murder to him, although Haskell would later claim that Loeffler was just trying to gain custody of their children. Police placed a wiretap and recorded her making a now infamous pinky swear to Loeffler that she wouldn't suffocate their son, quote, like I did to that baby. After a revised autopsy revealed alcohol in Ryan's blood, Haskell was accused of giving alcohol to Ryan before suffocating him. Haskell admitted that she had taken too much H that day and shouldn't have gone to work, but she denied killing Ryan. In October 2012, she was found guilty of third-degree murder and sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. In June 2009, 18-year-old Engelica Castillo was babysitting her 2-year-old cousin Jada Justice in Indiana. Jada's mother, Melissa, had taken her to Indiana for a 2-week trip, during which time they stayed with Engelica and her live-in boyfriend, Timothy Kachuk. What followed was a torrent of physical abuse that included slapping, hair-pulling, tying Jada to a chair, and hitting her with a belt. Jada had apparently spilled some juice and was generally misbehaving, which set off the abusers. In exchange for a maximum sentence of 50 years, Kachuk testified that Castillo had delivered the majority of the abuse, although he had also beaten the girl severely to get her to behave. After beating the child, Castillo and Kachuk were in their car on their way to buy H, when they realized that Jada was not breathing. When CPR failed to revive her, they returned home, covered the body, and switched cars. Before disposing of the child's remains, they went and bought the H. When Jada's body failed to burn, the couple mixed cement, poured it over the body, let it set, and dumped it in a swamp, all the while injecting themselves with H. Then they came up with a story about Jada having been abducted at a gas station, but Kachuk ultimately told the police the truth. Castillo's original sentence of life imprisonment was reduced to 65 years, meaning she will be a senior citizen before she can leave prison. In December 1962, 20-year-old Betty Smithey responded to a newspaper ad for a live-in babysitter in Phoenix. She was promptly hired to look after a family of 4 children. On New Year's Day, 1963, 15-month-old Sandy Gerberick was found dead. Smithey fled and was hitchhiking when she was apprehended by police the next day. She gave conflicting versions of events. First, she said that she might have strangled the baby with a pair of stockings. Then she claimed that she had awakened to find the child unresponsive and that she didn't recall killing her, but assumed she did. The trial revealed that Smithey had quite a tumultuous upbringing. She and her 6 sisters were taken from their mother and separated after the death of their father when Smithey was just 4 years old. She spent the next few years going from home to home. She was repeatedly abused and even spent 4 years in juvenile prison for attempting to kidnap an 18-month-old baby. Smithy managed to escape prison 4 times. Then one day in 1983, everything changed for her. Irma Simmons, the mother of a murdered child, wrote to Smithy to let her know that she had been forgiven long ago after Simmons found God. Smithy began to reflect on her life and became a more well-behaved prisoner. In August 2012, she was released after spending 49 years behind bars, making her the longest-serving female inmate in U.S. history. Laurie Dann was a relatively normal, if somewhat shy girl growing up. Coming from a well-off background, Dann never had any major aspirations in life other than to find a rich husband, which she achieved with the help of a little plastic surgery. The marriage wasn't great, with Laurie rarely going outside or helping with the housework. During divorce proceedings in 1986, Laurie bought an ice pick and stabbed her husband 2.5 centimeters from his heart. At the same time, her ex-boyfriend began receiving death threats. Police were never able to connect these events, however, and the attempted murder went unpunished. Dann went to college in 1987. There, she quickly gained a reputation as the elevator woman because she rode the elevator up and down all day. She was eventually kicked out after numerous complaints from other students about Dann leaving garbage and raw meat around the dorm, slashing furniture and books, and walking around naked. The dorm was later set ablaze, but Dann was never implicated. On May 20th, 1988, Dann finally snapped. Staying up all night, she prepared drinks and snacks laced with arsenic and delivered them to a number of houses, including frat houses. Although some was ingested, nobody died from the poisoned food. She then collected 2 children she was babysitting who threw away her poisoned drinks because they tasted off. Dann took the boys to a daycare center, which she then lit on fire along with the neighboring school. She was chased away and brought the boys back to their house, which she also lit on fire. She then went to a second elementary school where she shot and killed 8-year-old Nicholas Corwin and seriously injured 5 others. She fled the school before quickly crashing her car. Replacing her bloody shorts with a plastic bag, Dann broke into a nearby home where she held a family hostage for 6 hours, claiming the police were after her for shooting her rapist. Eventually, a 20-year-old Philip Andrews tried to wrestle the gun from Dann and was shot in the chest. At this point, Dann put the gun in her mouth and ended her life. In April 2001, 10-month-old Carlos Borjas and his 4-year-old sister were left in the care of Jesse Joe Hernandez and his wife. While both the children's mother and his wife were out of the house, Hernandez beat the 2 children, possibly with a flashlight. When the women returned, he told his wife that the kids were sleeping, but when the little girl complained that her head hurt, she was taken to the hospital. As this occurred, Hernandez's wife found Carlos and alerted the authorities. Although his sister survived the ordeal, Carlos died in hospital a week later. His skull had been severely fractured, and his body was covered in bruises. Hernandez had previously served 3 years for possession of drugs and inappropriately touching a child. Although he initially denied any involvement in the case, police managed to get him to confess using DNA evidence and stick figure drawings from the little girl. Hernandez spent 10 years on death row before he was executed in 2012. His last words were, "Tell my son I love him very much. God bless everybody." Continue to walk with God. Go Cowboys. Love y'all, man. Thank you. I can feel it, taste it. It's not bad. Brenda Gail Cutro operated a daycare center out of her home in Richland County, South Carolina. In January 1993, she claimed her first victim, 4-month-old Parker Colson. Cutro claims that she found the child unresponsive in his crib and that attempts to save him were unsuccessful. The autopsy would later attribute his death to sudden infant death syndrome, and Cutro became a SIDS activist. When 4-month-old Asher Meyer was injured 5 months later and subsequently diagnosed with shaken baby syndrome, police began investigating Cutro and the baby's mother. After the death of 4-month-old Ashlyn Daniel in September 1993, police began to look into the possibility that Cutro linked the 3 cases. Cutro was found guilty of murdering Daniel in 1994. But this was overturned 4 years later. A retrial in 2000 found her guilty of both murders. Prosecutors claim that Cutro had Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which is when people fake illnesses or inflict injuries on children to gain attention. Cutro had previously fabricated a story about an infant who had died of SIDS. This gave credence to the theory, although she was never officially diagnosed. On February 29, 2016, a number of small local news stations in Russia broadcast some very disturbing images. A woman, claiming to be a suicide bomber, was brandishing the head of a child in the streets of Moscow. The Uzbekistani woman, Gail Babakalova, was apprehended by police, who quickly determined that she had no explosives. Babakalova had been working as a carer for Nastya Mashiryakova, a 4-year-old Russian girl with special needs, for about 18 months when the incident took place. The family had never had any trouble with Babakalova before, although a popular Uzbekistani newspaper reported that she had struggled with schizophrenia for at least 15 years. Babakalova claimed that voices had told her to commit the murder. Apparently, the straw that broke her health had come 2 months earlier when she discovered that her husband back in Uzbekistan had started a new family. After being taken in by police, Babakalova led them to the apartment where she had strangled the girl before cutting off her head with a knife. Babakalova left Nastya's body in a cot before lighting the apartment on fire. Mainstream Russian media outlets came under fire for not covering the story, which they said was too gruesome to be shown on television. It must be noted that women in Russia cannot be sentenced to more than 25 years in prison, even for the murder of a 4-year-old child. However, Babakalova was found to be clinically insane and is currently being held in a psychiatric ward where she fears she is getting, quote, fat and unattractive. She hopes to be free within 3 years, despite saying there's a 50-50 chance that she'll kill again.